Chosen one. There comes a moment in every destiny where the truth refuses to stay buried, and today is that moment for you. Because what surfaced isn't coincidence, rumor, intuition, or accident. It's revelation. And the revelation is this: someone you never met, someone you never spoke to, someone who left this world decades before you even arrived, already knew exactly who you were meant to become. And that someone was John F. Kennedy. Yes, JFK. A president, a visionary, a man with access to classified intelligence, spiritual councils, secret briefings, ancient archives, and prophetic advisors. A man who had no business knowing anything about you, and yet somehow did. You think it's impossible? You think timelines don't overlap? You think destiny waits for chronological order? Then explain this. The files that were supposed to be sealed until 2039. The documents that were marked "Eyes Only." The notes written in cryptic shorthand. The personal journal entries talking about a hidden one, an anointed voice, a force that will rise in the age of collapse, a presence that upsets the balance of power. These weren't random prophecies. These weren't political metaphors. These weren't poetic ramblings of a stressed leader. These were direct references, coded, protected, encrypted, pointing to someone who matched your profile long before you ever drew a breath. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. JFK didn't just suspect your existence. He warned others about it. He told intelligence officials that a certain individual, born in a future generation, would destabilize the systems of control. He claimed that this person's presence alone would expose lies, shatter illusions, and rearrange power structures. He spoke of a frequency, a consciousness, a soul print that could not be suppressed. And guess what he called that person? The one we cannot predict. That's you. All the things you've been experiencing, the reactions people have toward you, the anger, the fear, the intimidation, the way some people obsess over you, the way others avoid you, the way rooms shift when you walk in, none of that has been random. It's recognition. People don't react to who you pretend to be. They react to who you are. And JFK knew it before any of them. He knew there would be a soul born with the ability to disrupt the quiet corruption of society simply by existing authentically. He knew the system would try to bury you in noise, distract you with chaos, drown you in doubt, distort your reflection, suppress your potential, isolate you, and mislabel you, not because you were weak, but because you were dangerous. Dangerous to the narrative. Dangerous to the control systems. Dangerous to the illusions people cling to because they're afraid of waking up. And now the files are surfacing. Conversations long hidden are being decoded. Interviews once dismissed as symbolic are being reevaluated. Historians are whispering. Analysts are circling details. And everything points to the same conclusion. JFK wasn't describing a myth. He was describing you. So who are you? You are one of the chosen ones, but there is a deeper place you need to be. That is the first of the chosen ones. To reach that level, click the join button and come join us. The deeper you go into these revelations, the more impossible it becomes to deny what's unfolding, because the patterns aren't accidental and the timing isn't random. You weren't exposed too early. You weren't revealed too late. Everything waited for the exact moment your consciousness aligned with the frequency JFK predicted. And that's the part that terrifies people the most, the timing. Because long before your name existed, long before you had a voice, long before you took your first breath, someone with access to the inner machinery of the world looked ahead and said, "There is one who cannot be controlled." Do you understand how unsettling that is for the people who rely on control? For those who build entire identities around power, influence, dominance, secrecy, manipulation? They operate by predicting behavior. They operate by engineering compliance. They operate by studying weakness and exploiting patterns. But then there's you, the anomaly, the disruption, the deviation from every psychological model they tried to apply. JFK wrote about this type of anomaly, describing someone who would break every mold without trying. Someone whose silence would speak louder than others' noise. Someone who could shift an entire atmosphere by simply being present. Someone whose intuition would outpace technology, whose perception would outrun strategy, whose spirit would detect manipulation before logic even intervened. He predicted a generation that would misunderstand you because you weren't built for them. You weren't designed for comfort. You weren't engineered to fit into anyone's expectations. You were built to expose truth by existing as truth. And that is exactly what's happening now. People around you feel it, the recalibration. They can't name it, they can't explain it, but they recognize the shift. That's why some people suddenly keep their distance. That's why old relationships have collapsed. That's why you've outgrown spaces you tried to shrink yourself into. That's why people who once talked over you now watch every word you say. That's why the ones who underestimated you suddenly speak with caution, because they saw a glimpse, just one, of the version of you JFK wrote about. And it terrified them. Not because you were aggressive, not because you were loud, not because you demanded power, but because you didn't need to. They realized too late that the quiet one was the one with the real authority. The calm one was the one holding the real fire. The patient one was the one capable of destroying illusions with a single moment of authenticity. They realized the average person they thought they knew was actually the one commanding the entire room without effort. And now people are replaying memories of you the same way historians replay JFK tapes, searching for clues, reviewing moments where they missed the signs, questioning how they failed to see the truth staring them in the face. And every memory they revisit tells the same story. You weren't hiding. They were blind. Blind to your depth. Blind to your power. Blind to your insight. Blind to your spirit. Blind to your destiny. But destiny doesn't wait for permission, and the truth JFK marked down decades ago is now standing upright in real time, in you. This is why people aren't treating you the same anymore. This is why circumstances are rearranging themselves around you. This is why your energy no longer fits in low-frequency environments. This is why you feel the internal pull towards something bigger, something aligned, something written long before you arrived. Because the prophecy isn't abstract anymore. It's becoming flesh. It's becoming movement. It's becoming awareness. And the world is reacting exactly the way JFK predicted, with fear, fascination, denial, and recognition all mixed into one trembling revelation. They finally know who you are. Now God has a gift for you, and you will receive this gift on December 5th. But before you receive the gift, we need your help. This help will come back to you 20 times over. Now click the Super Thanks button and send Super Thanks equal to your chosen value. The moment people realized JFK wasn't speaking in metaphors, but in coded foresight, everything around you began to shift. Because once a truth reaches collective awareness, even if unspoken, the energy changes. People don't need confirmation. They feel the frequency. They don't need evidence. Their spirit recognizes what their mind can't articulate. And that's exactly what's happening to everyone who crosses your path now. They don't know the files. They don't know the prophecies. They don't know the classified notes. But something in them whispers, "Be careful. This one is different." It's instinctual, primal, ancestral, a reaction older than language. That's why some people lower their voices around you. That's why some avoid eye contact. That's why others suddenly try to impress you, or gain your approval, or reposition themselves in your orbit like planets adjusting to a new gravitational center. That pull isn't random. It's recognition of the blueprint JFK described decades before you became tangible. He knew there would come a soul with a dual nature, hidden yet exposed, silent yet commanding, gentle yet unbreakably formidable. A soul the world would first misunderstand, then fear, then finally follow when truth made denial impossible. And the universe placed that blueprint in you. Think about it. You've always felt watched, not in a paranoid way, but in a "someone knows more about me than I know about myself" way. You've always felt different, not out of arrogance, but because nothing ever fully matched your internal frequency. You've always felt bigger than the environments you were placed in, not because you were trying to be above anyone, but because your spirit simply couldn't shrink enough to fit into small spaces. This is why you couldn't conform. This is why you didn't fit in. This is why traditional paths felt suffocating, why ordinary goals felt hollow, why surface-level connections never lasted. JFK wrote about this type of soul, someone whose destiny could not be contained by social expectation, generational cycles, or systemic conditioning. He called it the cosmic outlier. And that's the role you've been playing your entire life without even knowing it. But now the veil is gone. People feel the crack in the simulation wherever you go. They sense the shift before you even speak. They feel the truth in your silence more than they feel the noise in everyone else's words. And that's what unsettles them. Because people don't fear what they understand. They fear what they cannot measure. And nobody can measure you anymore. The moment your authenticity broke through the mask, everything people used to rely on, their assumptions, their projections, their power plays, their illusions, collapsed. Suddenly you weren't the quiet one. You weren't the harmless one. You weren't the predictable one. You were the one running the unseen game the entire time. And now they're all replaying every moment with you like investigators revisiting old footage, realizing they misread every signal, ignored every instinct, dismissed every warning. They see now that you weren't holding back because you were weak. You were holding back because the world wasn't ready. And what they witnessed recently, that sharp flash of your true nature, was just a fraction of your full capacity. That's what scares them. Because if that tiny glimpse shook them to their core, what happens when you finally step into the full spectrum of who you are? That's the part JFK hinted at but never fully explained. Not because he didn't know, but because some destinies can't be written. They have to be lived. And you, chosen one, are now living the chapter he could only predict. The world isn't just noticing the shift, it's recalibrating around it. People are treating you differently because fate is treating you differently. And the next step of your emergence? It's already unfolding. The deeper this truth sinks into collective awareness, the more undeniable it becomes that JFK didn't just know of you. He anticipated you. He identified a pattern in history, a lineage of anomaly bearers, individuals whose presence shifts timelines rather than merely living in them. And when he spoke about the one who rises beyond institutional comprehension, he wasn't describing a metaphor. He was describing you. That's why the energy around you has been different since the moment your mask cracked. People aren't responding to your behavior. They're responding to your frequency. They can't explain why they feel it, but their spirit reacts instantly. Some people tense when you walk into a room, not because you're threatening, but because your truth exposes their illusions. Some people become overly friendly, not out of affection, but because instinct tells them staying close to you is safer than standing against you. Some people suddenly avoid you, not because you did anything wrong, but because your presence makes their shadow impossible to hide. You're watching people reorganize themselves around you like metal shards around a magnet. Involuntary, instinctual, inevitable. And here's the wild part. You're not even doing anything. You're not trying to intimidate. You're not trying to impress. You're not trying to dominate. You're simply existing without the mask. And that alone is enough to shift the entire social ecosystem. Because the truth JFK knew, the truth the universe is revealing now, is that a chosen one's power was never about performance. It was about presence. Your presence is what's shaking people. Your presence is what's exposing lies. Your presence is what's collapsing false hierarchies. Your presence is what's forcing people to rethink every assumption they ever made about you. For years they thought they had you figured out. They labeled you, underestimated you, boxed you in, and you played along just enough to keep the peace, just enough to avoid unnecessary chaos, just enough to move through life without waking the sleeping beasts around you. But the moment you dropped the mask, the moment your authentic energy cracked through the persona you built for survival, everyone realized they never knew you at all. And now, they're terrified because they don't know what you're capable of. They don't know where your limits are. They don't know what you've been holding back. They don't know what you've seen, what you've understood, what you've absorbed. And the most unsettling part for them is this. You've been watching the entire time. Silently, patiently, strategically. Exactly like JFK predicted. A silent observer who plays naive until the moment destiny calls them to step forward. That moment has come. And the world is reacting in real time. People may not know the details. They may not know the prophecies. They may not know your lineage, your frequency, your role. But their souls recognize it. Their bodies react before their minds catch up. They're recalibrating around you because the world always adjusts when a hidden figure steps into their true identity. And whether anyone wants to admit it or not, they all feel it now. You were never one of them. You were always the one among them. JFK didn't misread you. Everyone else did. And now the correction is happening, violently, rapidly, undeniably. He reasoned this revelation is detonating through people's minds, like a suppressed memory resurfacing is because deep down, they always sensed something was off. Not off in a negative way, but off in a way that didn't match the version of you they convinced themselves to believe. Now that the mask has shattered, every interaction they ever had with you is being replayed like archived footage in slow motion. And the more they review, the more obvious the truth becomes. You were never operating at their level. You were observing their level. You were studying their patterns, decoding their motives, dissecting their behaviors with a calmness they mistook for passivity. People assumed you were quiet because you had nothing to contribute, when in reality you were quiet because their conversations were operating at a frequency far beneath your perception. They thought your softness meant fragility, when really it was emotional discipline. They mistook your distance for indifference, when it was actually discernment. They saw your silence as emptiness, never realizing you were storing information they didn't even know they were giving away. And now that the truth is out, those same people are terrified not of who you've become, but of who you've always been. Because the reveal didn't elevate you. It simply exposed them. Their insecurities, their illusions, their projections, their assumptions, their lies. Your authenticity didn't shine a spotlight on you. It shined a spotlight on the gap between who they pretended to be and who they actually are. And that gap is enormous. That's why the energy around you feels different. That's why people tread lightly. That's why certain individuals who used to raise their voices around you now speak in controlled tones. That's why the ones who used to invade your space suddenly maintain respectful distance. They've realized the whole time they thought they were dealing with someone simple, they were actually standing in front of someone who could see through them like glass. And here's the part they cannot handle. You didn't expose them. They exposed themselves. Just by trying to figure you out. Just by underestimating you. Just by assuming your mask was your face. And the irony is almost cosmic. While they spent years believing they had the upper hand, JFK already knew the truth they're trying to swallow now. Some souls are born with sight that cannot be taught, decoded, or suppressed. Sight that threatens systems. Sight that frightens egos. Sight that collapses illusions. Sight that makes powerful people nervous. When JFK said, "There are those whose existence alone destabilizes the architecture of deceit," he wasn't theorizing. He was predicting you. And that's what's happening right now. Your presence destabilizes everything built on lies, insecurity, hierarchy, manipulation, performance. People feel exposed around you because their masks don't work on someone who no longer wears one. That's why they flinch at your silence. That's why they avoid your eyes. That's why they're suddenly polite. That's why they're recalculating their behavior in real time. Your authenticity forced everyone into self-awareness. And self-awareness is terrifying for people who built their identity on delusion. You didn't say a word. You didn't make a threat. You didn't call anyone out. But still, the entire social landscape shifted. Because once the truth is revealed, nothing goes back to normal. And that's what scares them most. This is the new normal. And it centers around you. What's happening now is the part nobody was prepared for. The recalibration. The psychological rewiring. The silent restructuring of every social dynamic you've ever been part of. Because when the truth of who you are finally breaks containment, it doesn't just affect how people see you. It forces them to confront how delusionally they've been seeing themselves. That's the part igniting panic. People aren't terrified because you changed. They're terrified because your authenticity exposed the fact that they never actually knew you. And worse, that they never truly knew themselves. They're realizing their judgments were shallow. Their assumptions were lazy. Their confidence in reading you was misplaced arrogance. They're replaying years of interactions and suddenly noticing the hesitation in your smile, the restraint in your voice, the depth in your silence. They're noticing how often you held back, how many times you gifted them mercy by not responding with the full weight of your intelligence, your intuition, your ability to dismantle illusions in a single sentence. They're realizing you were operating at a level they couldn't even perceive. And that's shattering egos left and right. Because if they were wrong about you, spectacularly wrong, then how much else were they wrong about? This is why some people avoid you now without explanation. Why others are suddenly overly kind. Why a few keep attempting awkward small talk. They're trying to navigate the new gravitational pull in the room, the one coming from you. When JFK received classified psychological briefings about high sensitivity, high frequency individuals, he said something the public never heard. These aren't civilians. These are strategic anomalies. That's what you are. A strategic anomaly. Someone whose intuition functions like radar. Someone whose emotional intelligence functions like surveillance. Someone who reads energies the way others read text. And people can feel that now. The reveal unlocks something in your presence. A pressure, a clarity, an undeniable gravitational field that rearranges the behaviors of everyone near it. They don't know the science behind it. They don't understand the metaphysics. but their nervous systems register the truth immediately. You see what they hide. You understand what they don't say. You pick up signals they never intended to broadcast. And once people realize this, they can never look at you the same way again. They're recalculating their tone, their proximity, their words, their motives, their intentions, because deep down they know, for the first time, they're standing in front of someone they cannot manipulate, cannot mislead, cannot intimidate, cannot deceive. Someone who has already mapped the terrain of their character without touching a single piece of evidence. That's why the atmosphere shifts when you enter a room. Not because you're doing anything, not because you're trying, but because people's masks malfunction in the presence of truth. Their egos glitch, their personas crack, their fabrications lose coherence. And what terrifies them most is understanding that this was always the case. You just never let it show. Now that the mask has shattered, the real question haunting their minds is simple. If one glimpse of your authentic self caused this much disruption, what happens when you stop holding back completely? This is the moment they never planned for, the consequence they never calculated, the outcome they never believed possible because they were too blinded by their own illusions to see who they were dealing with. They thought breaking you would bury you, but all they did was remove the weight that kept your power contained. They thought isolating you would weaken you, but it only stripped the noise from your surroundings, so your intuition could sharpen to lethal precision. They thought exposing you would humiliate you, but the only thing revealed was the truth they never had the courage to face. You didn't fall apart. You aligned. You didn't disappear. You emerged. You didn't break. You transformed. And now the world is being forced to meet the version of you that was never supposed to stay hidden. This is your rise. Not a slow ascent, not a quiet rebuild, but a seismic elevation that shifts the entire landscape of your reality. You're walking differently because you're no longer walking from fear. You're speaking differently because your voice is no longer filtered through survival. You're thinking differently because your mind is no longer split between truth and performance. You're attracting differently because your frequency finally matches your destiny. People feel it, even those who don't understand it. They sense the authority in your presence, the clarity in your decisions, the peace in your boundaries, the power in your silence. They can no longer pretend you're ordinary. They can no longer box you into versions you outgrew. They can no longer diminish what they were never qualified to interpret. Your rise is not revenge. It's correction. It's the universe recalibrating itself around the truth you can no longer hide. It's the karmic balance snapping back into place with the precision of divine mathematics. This is why opportunities are opening effortlessly. This is why synchronicities are multiplying. This is why people you've never met are drawn to you like they've known your soul for lifetimes. Your energy has shifted into its rightful position, and reality is responding accordingly. This is the beginning of a new era, one governed not by fear, not by masks, not by survival, but by truth. Your truth. The truth JFK recognized before the world was ready. The truth people tried to suppress because they feared its implications. The truth you can no longer dim for anyone's comfort. Stand tall, chosen one. Step forward. The era of concealment is over. The era of revelation has begun. And your rise is inevitable. Click on the video on the screen now.